Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. I'm your host and your guide here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern for the Bible Forum. We do this regularly, and then these things are being recorded, and they are at your disposal on the website forever. You can watch everything that we've done for the last year or so, plus at your leisure, or you can come and join us every Sunday night. We have a chat room. We have some folks in here. Yeah, they're trying to help me out with my brain dead thing, AT&T. Yeah, I got you. Tonight I want to talk to you about Glenn Beck. Millionaire Glenn Beck. He's worth, estimates are somewhere between $85 and $150 million. Don't know if that's true, but that's what people estimate. I don't know who these people are that do that. But he wants you to finance his newest endeavor. And his newest endeavor is actually larceny. Do you watch it? Do you listen to it? Do you go on to the website? Do you hear him railing against the gate crashers at our southern border? We need a fence. We need to keep these people out. We need to vet these people. We need to take these people and send them back. They didn't come in. All the people that are going through it the right way, standing in line, doing the right thing, are getting pushed aside for all these other people. And this is something that the government is doing, and the government is doing an immoral thing. Larceny is defined as the unlawful taking and removing of another's personal property with the intent of permanently depriving the owner. It can also be called theft. Now, he's not coming into your house and taking stuff. But this is how people describe what's going on at our southern border. The effort to open our borders to illegal immigrants is a form of larceny. And the Glenn Becks of this world are standing foursquare against it. But now it's come full circle. And this is exactly what Glenn Beck is now advocating. And he wants you to pay for it. He's responding. If you listen, it's an emotional episode. He's responding to his own emotional frustration at the tens of thousands, now 500,000 Muslims that are fleeing Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, North Africa, Somalia, all kinds of places like that, heading for Eastern Europe. They want to get to Norway, Sweden, Finland, those places, because they have the best jobs and they let people in like crazy. And if you can get in there, you only have to wait 3 months or something like that, and you can bring your family over. Where the rest of them, you got to wait a year. I mean, they got all this worked out. Glenn Beck is actually saying that he is so upset about these people and the fact that there are countries around that won't take them in, that won't help, like us. Now, our Secretary of State just said we're going to increase the number of immigrants, 30,000, I guess. We're going to take in 100,000 a year from now on instead of 70 because of these people. That's a drop in the hat, in the bucket. Saudi Arabia has, I forget how many, 100,000 air-conditioned tents. They ain't taking nobody. And Hungary's sealing their border. Croatia has sealed their border. Other European countries are rethinking the whole thing because these people are causing problems. And Glenn Beck is openly willing, saying out loud that he would rather suffer incarceration himself than to do nothing, to stand by and watch all this happen. His purpose is to finance what he has to call a forced relocation of thousands of fleeing refugees, and he cites famed Oskar Schindler, who rescued 1,200 Jews from Nazi Germany during the Second World War. And he says he's going to rescue more than Schindler. But that's where the comparison breaks down. Glenn Beck wants to sneak Muslims into this country. He even talks about the Rio Grande. I know some rivers that aren't being guarded. Oskar Schindler was a businessman. He had a Polish factory. He hired Jews and then gave them false identities to protect them. He used his own money to bribe the Nazis. He went broke. The official estimates of the fleeing refugees, people fleeing from ISIS, is that out of the 3.5 million they estimate are ultimately on the move, 2% of them may actually be ISIS militants. Do the math. 2% of 3 million people. That's an army. Schindler used his own money. In the end, Schindler's Jews, it was the name they gave this group, paid so he could eat. He had nothing. He lost his family, he lost his property, he lost everything. All Glenn Beck has lost is his mind. But then I think about who Glenn Beck is. Glenn is a reformed alcoholic. A reformed alcoholic who was at a very low ebb in his life, and who has now become a very wealthy and flamboyant populist. He advocates for decency and for respect and for honor, for traditional American values, for the rule of law. And all of that he credits God and the founding principles that have made this country great. From atop his media outlet spouting conservative, God-honoring principles, Glenn Beck has done as much or more than any other contemporary American to rally folks around God and country. He credits God and biblical principles for his very survival and for his success. And maybe that's where the answer lies, in this disconnect. Glenn is not a Bible Christian. He says he's a Christian. People can call themselves whatever they want. Christianity is defined by the Bible. Glenn Beck is not a Bible Christian. He's a Mormon. He's a follower of Joseph Smith, a man who created a religious system whereby men like himself, Smith, who disdained biblical Christianity, could rise to actual godhood and do it through good works. That's Mormonism. Mormon theology teaches that God is the spirit child of Elohim. Elohim is or was, I guess he is, the ruler of a planet called Kolob. This is the planet nearest to heaven, in case you're interested. The biblical Adam is Elohim's spirit son, who was given the planet Earth to populate and to rule. This particular Adam, however, lost his deity as a result of his sin and became a mere mortal. But he began to populate the earth with men who were capable of becoming gods if they did enough good works, as apparently Jesus did. Now, it doesn't have to make sense. It simply must be believed. In Mormon theology, the God of Mormonism does not have absolute power. David Paulison is a professor at Brigham Young University, a Mormon university, and he says that God in Mormon theology merely has the ability to use and to maximize natural laws to his advantage and for his purposes. Sounds like any other character you might have read about. Enter Glenn Beck, the Mormon. Every Mormon male has the possibility of rising to godhood, like Jesus did, and ruling over his own planet. His then spirit wives serve to populate that world. Mormon men may marry as many women as they please, living or dead. And they do this through a ceremony at the temple in Utah. Several years ago, it was reported that Israel was calling on Mormons, the Mormon church, to stop plundering their death notices, their death records for women who would then be married off to Mormon men. Speaking recently in a church in Florida, a church called the Crossing Church, Beck said, quote, "If we are God's children, then we have powers, rights, responsibilities as his children. It is time," he says, "to stop talking about our rights and start living up to our responsibilities." These are statements that you must listen to through the prism of Mormon doctrine. The venues that Beck is choosing are churches, but the message is moral and the message is political. There's no theology to support anything he's saying. There's no effort to build folks up on godly principles. There's only the clarion call to a social activism that is earthly. In another church, Beck said he saw his responsibility in terms of bringing all churches together. And inquiring minds want to know, under what doctrines? Under what banners? For what purposes? We have observed, watched, listened to the ecumenists for close to 100 years, shaming separatists for their self-centered and arrogant standards, holding fast to the Word of God. The efforts have been varied from, well, let's just all get along, to what difference does doctrine make? To the sundry ploys and of tongues and terminology. But the goal has always been the same. Where are the efforts to bring people together around the fundamental doctrines of the Word of God? Fully defined, fully illustrated by the Bible, and interpreted in the normal way that words are interpreted. For example, my favorite, what does this phrase mean to you? Listen carefully. Mary had a little lamb. What's that mean? Are there several interpretations for that? Or does it stand upon the definition of the words, combined with the grammatical construct built into that phrase, and the historical context in which the person lived who uttered those words or wrote them down? And if a person heard those words or read those words and did not take all of that into consideration, would they have any idea what the words meant? No, they wouldn't. That is the ordinary way to interpret a sentence that's written down. It's called the grammatical, historical method of interpretation. Some add literal. I think it's Grammatical takes that into consideration. Somebody writes you a letter. That letter was written 100 years ago. And they talk about something. And you say, oh, he's talking about this. No. He's talking about what he was talking about 100 years ago, not what you think it is today. And words have changed over time. And that's Bible interpretation. You have to go back to what the author said. What was in his mind is all that says. You don't get to recreate it. But that's what we have today in Christendom. Jesus' parable of the sower and the seed has made countless preachers wealthy and a myriad of sufferers more destitute. Why? Because Jesus was teaching that to be healed or to get out of debt, we need to sow a seed of faith. And that seed needs to die. And as it dies, it comes back more powerful than ever. Oral Roberts, seed faith. It's not a Bible idea at all. It's not what Jesus was teaching at all. But unconscionable men and women have used that and been creative with the interpretation. And they have been fleecing the sheep and will continue to do so. Shame on them. Shame on Glenn Beck. Shame on us for not being smarter, more careful. I think Glenn Beck's vision overall is larger than anything he talks about. Not that he's being disingenuous at all. He's being sincere. But he has a larger program in mind. Is he right? Should we be spending money to sneak these people into the country? No, he's not right. Yeah, but it's the moral thing to do. It's illegal. Christians are called to live according to the law of the land. What if the law is unjust? It's not your problem. If it's an unjust law being visited upon you and you want to violate that for conscience sake, that's your business. But this is something bigger. This is the law. This is our immigration policy. How can the guy who is the leading general in the fight against this horrible immigration fiasco jump in and become one of them? Well, because he cares. Be careful.